Welcome to Disrupt Health Tech, the podcast where we dive deep into the innovations transforming healthcare. I'm your host, Wendy Austin, and today's segment is a part of a 6-part series titled Building Health Tech from Concept to Care. Within 6 episodes, we'll peel back the layers of what it truly takes to bring groundbreaking health technology to life, from the initial spark of the idea through vigorous clinical validation, smart product management, strategic sales, effective marketing, and powerful analytics. We'll cover the entire life cycle. So whether you're an entrepreneur, an investor, a healthcare professional, or simply curious about the future of medicine, this is your essential guide to understanding how health tech moves from visionary concept all the way to delivering real-world care. Let's get started. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Disrupt Health Tech. I am your host, Wendy Austin, and today we're going to talk about when startups should begin scaling their sales. My guest today is Eric Gombrich, who is a Chief Commercial Officer and Strategic Advisor to many health tech startup companies. Welcome, Eric, to Disrupt Health Tech. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us more about the various startups that you have or are working with?
Thanks, Wendy. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's exciting to be discussing this topic. I've been in health tech innovation work for the entirety of my career, starting way back when I was implementing systems in the States at the bedside in hospitals, and progressed into sales engineering and then into sales and moved all the way up into the C-suite and on a multiple occasions. Including as a CEO on a couple of occasions. A lot of that work has taken me around the world, and I now provide support predominantly in North America, but also continuing to work in Europe and other parts of the globe. And the work has been, intentionally, because it's something I'm passionate about, on the early stage companies, the disrupting phase, if you will, which I think is appropriate for your particular podcast here today.
Yes. So as a Chief Commercial Officer, can you speak to the biggest thing that startups get wrong when they start to think about selling their products and or services?
Oh, wow. I don't know that there's a single thing. And it's not so much that they get wrong, but they may overlook certain things, if you will. And I think some of the key things that I find common. One is, and you commonly hear the term product market fit, is one of the things that I think a lot of organizations struggle with, or innovators struggle with. Part of the reason is because they see a problem, and in a lot of cases they immediately think, okay, we can fix that problem. Technology can fix that problem, but they don't necessarily see how that problem or that function, if you will, fits into the broader system of things. And so they're not necessarily aware of, the precursors that are resulting in the problem, or if I can refer to them as the postcursors or the after effects, because there may be a reason that things are being done the way they are, as inefficient as it may seem. So without having that broader view of the whole healthcare ecosystem and flow, whether it's information flow or sample collection to analysis, things along those lines. If they don't see the big picture, a lot of times they will build a solution for that narrow specific problem that they've identified, but they really struggle in the implementation because of the disruption it has on the workflow and the broader system. And so that's one of the challenges. And it takes a lot of time and intentionality, if you will, to see the bigger picture, because so many innovators want to jump in and start building their MVP or their version 1 of their solution, whatever it is, and start testing it with people who are oftentimes very enthusiastic to do that testing with them. And yeah, we solved that problem, but nobody's going to implement it because of the disruption it has in the bigger system. And so that's one of the big problems I think I see commonly.
Yeah, that's a big one. So we've talked before about educating the market, in particular when the product is highly innovative and really not intuitive. How important is it for a health tech startup to spend investment dollars on educating their clients, and what does that typically look like?
Yeah, and that gets back to your prior question. I think the other thing that I commonly see organizations struggle with, innovative organizations struggle with, is overestimating how innovative what they're doing truly is. And either overestimating or underestimating, for that matter. So there's a lot of work out there going on right now where people talk about we're innovating. Well, the fact that you're implementing something for the first time in your institution, your organization, your geography, your community, whatever, doesn't necessarily make it innovative. If other people have done it elsewhere, you're just kind of replicating something, but you're implementing it for the first time.
Right.
And so the reason that that's important, I think, to recognize, if you're truly doing something innovative, people don't know about it. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it does. They don't understand the value proposition. If people understand it, somebody must have done it before to help them understand what the value proposition and the capabilities of this thing are. And so it's not that innovative. And so when you're truly doing something innovative, you have to educate before you can sell. And I think we're right now in a moment of that when you consider AI. And the way it's exploding everywhere. But even if you go back as recently as a year ago or 2 years ago, how many people really understood what AI was? I mean, we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, there are a handful of people on the planet that really understand it, I think. But if you go to the typical chief nursing officer, chief medical officer, chief operating officer, and talk about AI today, they kind of have an idea, and they're hearing about what it might be able to do for their organization and the value it might have for that's all the educational phase. And so if you immediately show up saying, can I give you a proposal and can we get this thing implemented? Their heads are exploding because they still don't know, what is this going to do for us? We don't quite understand it. And I think one of the things that truly innovative companies, early stage companies have, is they underestimate the need to invest in that, not just the money, but the time, because it takes time to educate people on these things. Remember, these people, these executives, they're really busy. And so to find the time to learn something totally new, when right now they're trying to put out fires day in and day out, and the doors open and find more nurses and more doctors and all that type of stuff, they don't even have time to really pay attention to the education you're providing. And so I like to say to my teams, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. We need to slow down a little bit. And oftentimes what I find from these innovative companies, Wendy, is they underestimate the timeline. As a result of that, they accelerate prematurely the investments in sales on this. So they now have human capital as well as financial capital going into selling, but they've started that process too early. And now the pressure starts to build. Why aren't we closing deals? Why aren't we closing deals? And they get into this, dare I say, death spiral, if you will, of blaming the salespeople, if you will, or the marketing team, or whatever the case is, when they've not yet primed the market yet. And it creates this tremendous amount of chaos and challenge in the business. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, yeah. So to tack on to that, what is the role of the salesperson while educating the market then during this time phrase? Or
it's an educator.
Should they even have a sales team?
It's an educator. It's an evangelizer. And that brings up an interesting, I think, thing that again commonly comes up. Innovative companies, unfortunately, will sometimes hire salespeople who are really good salespeople in selling products that are well understood. The term I use, and I know I get some pushback from some people when I say this, but commodities. In healthcare, for example, let's talk about, you're selling an electronic health record system, okay, or an EMR. Generally, the industry understands what an EHR or an EMR is. So they've been educated. So you may be the top salesperson at, I'm not going to name any vendors, but I'm sure your audience can think of some of the dominant participants in the market, but you could hire the number one salesperson from that company. They may not be a good educator. They are good at working a client, developing a relationship, sorting out what the problems are that customer has, putting together a proposal and closing a deal, if you will, signing a contract, but they might not be a good educator. And so again, that wrong fit, have we taken a really good salesperson, brought them into the company prematurely, unbeknownst to us prematurely, expected them to do certain things that they don't have the competency to do. And then when they fail, oftentimes we look at the salesperson being the failure rather than having put the right person in the right seat to do the right thing. So I think that's one of the big challenges that we see.
Very good. So we often hear startups in that stage 0 to 1, meaning they have 0 or 1 client, or a stage 1 to 10 phase, meaning they have less than 10 clients. During those phases, what do you think some of the pitfalls of doing major product changes are based on this low number of clients at that early stage?
Yeah, and again, that's a bit of a common theme. It gets back to the product market fit. I think a lot of your viewers and a lot of us out here are familiar with the Sentinel work of crossing the chasm. And all that identified. And when you're pre-chasm, when you're truly doing something innovative, we may have a hypothesis on what the value proposition is, the benefits that it will deliver, but we don't necessarily know. And just because somebody has agreed to explore this with you, they'll be your first customer, or amongst your first 10, as you say, customers, and they, as an organization, have a desire or a need to truly innovate. You are addressing a problem that is, if you will, life-threatening to their organization, and they're prepared to go ahead and give this a try. You're starting a journey of exploration with both of you, and we don't know enough yet. And so when that customer comes back, or those few customers come back and say, could we do this? Could we do that? Oftentimes, I think this is kind of at the foundation of your question, oftentimes we want to say yes, because we want to keep that customer happy. But it oftentimes can take us off the path of what we're really trying to do. And again, back to my earlier comments, one of the challenges is around this workflow integration and the disruption across the whole continuum, the process thing. And a lot of these changes end up being about, well, how can we integrate this into the process? And you see the whole company start to change in that regard. And the challenge in that, it's not tough if you got one customer. You just kind of go where they tell you to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Ironically, if you step back from that and consider that, okay, so you're a consulting company building a custom project or product for one customer. That's what you are, is you're now a consultant. Now the question is, do the other 9 customers that are coming next, or the next 90 or 9,000, have the exact same need? And if you have not done your analysis again on how do we fit into the whole continuum, the whole process, the whole workflow, all of that, is this a consistent thing that is scalable across a large market? Do they have the same problems? All of that. A lot of times you can end up spending a lot of R&D dollars, development dollars, et cetera, fixing a solution that becomes a one-off for a very small size market, if you will.
Yeah, and I can think of quite a few startups that I think fell into that trap, and they're no longer around now. Some pretty high profile ones as well.
and I think in my experience, I think one of the things that I've seen for companies that have been successful is a very strong understanding that we are still in the MVP, or minimally viable product stage. We are at the early, we're not ready to scale this thing yet. Right. Yeah, we had one customer. We've now got 5. We've now got 10. We've now got 15. But we haven't necessarily really nailed down what is the solution, what's the value proposition, how broad does the solution need to be to fit into that workflow, that continuum, if you will, or how much can we narrow it down? And they get on this cycle of, instead of spending time, money, energy on the evangelizing and the education of the market, they pour more money into R&D and building more product and more features because the customers have asked for it.
Yeah.
And so now, again, you've built something for a very small market. The rest of the market doesn't understand what the problem is you're trying to solve or how you solve it that's unique. So they're not out going to Google looking for the solution. Find me a widget-me-wig. Nobody knows what a widget-me-wig is, so nobody's searching for it. So,
Right.
You don't need a lot of marketing dollars yet.
Yeah.
You need to go prime that market. And if you're putting too much money into the product development side, you kind of get into this trap again. And then if you're in a situation where you've got external investors,
Yeah.
you start getting pressure from them saying, look, we've continued to pour money into building this product. Where are the sales coming from? Right. And so you get caught in this trap.
Right. So, and this kind of goes into this, but we talked previously about some standard patterns that you've seen for healthcare brands, and identifying those patterns to know when they're ready to scale their sales.
Yep.
Can you expand upon what you think those patterns are?
Yeah, I think it's I can't name that, but I remember in particular one of the companies I worked with. I actually was the chief commercial officer. Wasn't the official title at the time. We weren't using that title, but I was responsible for revenue generation. There was a point where two of the, I will say, product evangelists that we had, I wouldn't necessarily call them salespeople, because again, we were still in this education phase.
Right.
They came to me on a Monday morning in our weekly kind of stand-up, and they said, we don't have a lot going on this week. There's not a lot for us to do. And that was the epiphany of me. You mean the market is no longer needing the education because my sales guys are telling me they're buried? So you've seen this flip from, I don't understand what you're doing, to people saying, I need to see what you are doing.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's not just the marketing awareness, right? It's now you're starting to see people using keywords and searches and things along those lines. They're starting to look for a solution like yours. That's the point you start saying we are transitioning from education into sales.
Yeah, very good. So given that pattern, when would a startup know that they're ready to scale up the sales enablement, hire sales staff, or should they have been doing this all along?
Yeah, well, and that's another interesting thing. So, and again, it's a common thing that I've seen early stage companies struggle with is, I'm a believer that virtually everybody, all of us as individuals, have experience in sales, but on the buying side. We are the consumer.
That's true.
Right. So we walk to the grocery store, we have the freedom to walk around and choose the products we want. And yes, we've been influenced by the advertising that's been happening. We walk into Best Buy saying, I'm looking for a television. Okay. You're post-education at that point. I know what a TV does. Right. So I'm going out looking for a television. So we all have these personal experiences on the buying side. And we tend to, what I have tended to see in a lot of companies that have struggled, we bring that mindset into, okay, well, this is how the sales process works. And it's not the same thing. First of all, you're dealing in what we're talking about today, we're dealing with businesses buying, which are different than consumers buying. And when we're still in that early phase, the education phase, and even just as we're moving out of the education phase, customers typically don't know how to buy your innovative product. Like they don't even know who do they need to bring from their organization into the decision-making cycle. Yeah. We see this a lot on the IT technology side where, we may go present to a chief medical officer, chief nursing officer, whatever the case may be. They love the idea. They're in a place where they can do innovation. They might have some budget. They sign up as your first or one of your first 10 customers, back to your example. They go ahead and implement the solution. We're seeing ROI. They're seeing positivity, benefits, all that kind of stuff. They never involve the IT department. Right? Because this was an innovative exploration, maybe grant-funded project. And so all of a sudden, the mindset from the C-suite of the innovation company is, oh, look at this. We met this person, this CMO at a conference. It was 60 days later, we signed a contract. There's our sales cycle. We now know we can close these deals in 60 days. No, what you closed was this experimentally innovative type of project.
Right.
And so you can't build, your whole sales model, your commercial model based on a 60-day sales cycle. You don't know what the buying process is yet. And so back to your question, I am addressing it in that the scaling and the enablement is also dependent on us learning what is going to be the buying process from the customer for this new solution that, if it is truly innovative, they don't know how to buy. Right. So I may need salespeople that don't respond to an RFP. They're not going to issue an RFP. They're not going out shopping for a solution that's innovative yet. Right. But they are adroit at working with the customer to help the customer figure out their own internal buying process. And so we may, for example, say to somebody, look, I know you're all excited about this. You know that your colleague, the CMO down the street, has seen great effect with our solution. We're really excited to work with you. Have you considered that you might want to bring IT into this conversation before we get too far down the road? Like, let's proactively disrupt the process. It's going to slow down the sales process conceptually, because it's going to seem like, why are we having so many meetings? Because they need to have these meetings to get to the point where they can sign a contract and implement your solution. And if you put your head in the sand thinking, nope, we can do this in 60 days, it's going to get stopped on the 59th day in the process and see problems. And so there's this learning process. And once you learn what that buying process is, we can now design our sales process and all of the enablement tools we need to go after that. And that includes doing things like identifying what is the optimal customer profile, or the ICP, if you will. Who should we be targeting? Now you got that information. Now it's time to turn on marketing as well. Because until I know who I'm going after and what I'm saying and what the value proposition is, probably don't need a lot of marketing.
Right. Right. So between the educating the market, between finding the right people to have in the room, and then, the actual sales side of things, it sounds like this is going to take a long time. So how long does it typically take for a startup in the health tech space in particular to really see sales coming in consistently? Yeah, well, that's a bit of a loaded question. And again, from my perspective, in my experience, it depends on how early the founders embrace some of these things I'm talking about. Right. If they realize, look, we are not ready to sell, we need to continue educating, even though we've got 3 customers and they're raving fans for our product, we're not there yet. If they have that, and I'm using 3 as an example, if they have that diligence and that commitment to understanding, this process, the whole time to scale gets a lot shorter. When they don't, they end up going off on these tangents and down the path that just burn a lot of time. And not only when they realize it, do they need to correct it, but a lot of times they have to unwind a lot of what they've done. For example, it's not uncommon that they may have taken on some customers and made product enhancements like you were asking about earlier, and now realize we don't want to support those customers in this use case anymore. So now we have to abandon customers that we've had because we've realized our real product market fit is in a slightly different place. May have to do things like lay off some of my salespeople or things like that because I hired the wrong type of salespeople, all of this type of stuff. So there's a lot of unwinding that needs to happen. If you're not careful, now I got to deal with the fact I got to go raise more money because I burned capital that I, inefficiently, and now I got to go raise some more money. So when it's done well, I think, from the time that we have the first demonstratable, I'll call it an MVP of the product, and we're going to go show it to, or let's say implement it to the first customer, I think you're probably on a good 2-year time frame if you're doing it well before you can get it to start scaling it into that true sales mode. I think you need a good 2 years of educating the market and learning from the market. At a minimum. Okay. All right. Wow, that's I think that's actually very helpful for quite a few startups that might be listening today.
Okay.
Let's talk about your advising company, Ask-Lepius. It's a very interesting name. Would you like to share what the services are that you provide and how you came up with that name?
Yeah, I mean, Asclepius is the the Greek god of medicine. It's not spelt the way that we have. We've put a play on it with the word ask at the start of it, but it is pronounced Asclepius. People will commonly know of it. It's the asp with the snake around us, the symbol, the medical symbol. That's Asclepius. And so, of course, we put ask in the name because people ask us for help. And so the services that we provide are really on the commercialization, go-to-market type of things. A lot of times it has to do with bringing brand new products to the market. Again, a lot of the things we've already discussed today with respect to, we've got an MVP, we got a few customers. We seem to be stalling in sales. Why are we stalling? How do we fix that? How do I identify product market fit, things along those lines? The other thing that we do quite frequently is help people cross borders. Particularly, I'm a dual American and Canadian citizen. Have a ton of experience on both sides of the border, and family on both sides of the border, and homes on both sides of the border. So I go back and forth across the border. Very, very different healthcare systems, obviously, between Canada and the United States. Canada is more like, a lot of other, what are commonly referred to single payer or socialized health systems. But quite honestly, Canada is not exactly the same as all of the others. Organizations trying to bring their solutions into other markets are challenged a lot of times in understanding, again, that systemic process. How does the money flow through the system? How are people reimbursed? Who's responsible for what? A lot of variances on these things. And being able to get that messaging correct is something we help with a lot of these companies. And then we actually, we do work for the company. So it's not just on the advising side. So they'll bring some of our folks in on a fractional basis, as a part-time sales director or part-time marketing director or things along those lines. And so those are the kind of services that we provide.
Good. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Eric. And I really enjoyed discussing identifying when startups are ready to scale their sales efforts. For more information about either Disrupt Health Tech or Ask-Lepius, please see the links below. Thank you so much for attending today, and see you next episode.
That's great. You nailed the name.
Very good. Remember, this is just one episode of a 6-part series, and each one will bring you closer to understanding the full picture of health tech innovation. You won't want to miss all 6. Please be sure to subscribe to Disrupt Health Tech so you don't miss a single episode of the series Building Health Tech from Concept to Care. Thank you so much for listening, and join us next time for more insights into the future of healthcare technology.